Hey everyone, good evening and welcome to this year's Budget Town Hall. We're excited that you're joining us tonight to talk a little bit about our next fiscal year and the county manager's budget proposal, which he will present to the county board in February. However, this is the time for early engagement and an opportunity for you to provide insight to the county manager before he starts to put pen to paper and officially creates his budget. So with that, we have lots to get to. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about the budget outlook, what's been happening around COVID budgeting and spending and some of the federal dollars that have come in and how that impacts our budget. And then, really hear from you about giving your thoughts about if the county manager has to make some tough decisions, where he puts some funding and where those areas where we might need to be a little shy of big thinking. So with that, I want to introduce Mark Schwartz, our county manager, and Richard Stevenson, our director of budgeting. And we are very excited to have both of them tonight. So thank you very much. Mark Schwartz.
Thank you very much, Bryna, and hello to everybody. I'm going to keep my commentary short so that we can get to questions. And if we don't get enough questions, then you'll hear more than enough from me. Bryna summarized where we are in the process. We're about 2 months away from the actual proposal of the budget, which will happen in the second week of February. And then the county board will take it under consideration for adoption in April. And this is for the fiscal year that begins July 1 of next year. So we have received already from the county board in October a set of guidelines on how to prepare the budget. And the first priority laid out by the board was employee compensation. For a few years, our employees have not received raises. And like many of you who are listening, the price of goods and the costs of items have gone up. And so we need to try to stay competitive. And also, it's a very tough environment out there to hire and fill some of our slots. We are having a difficult time at that. So that's really important. And beyond that, to make sure that we continue to fund those needs for the pandemic and that we follow through on testing and vaccination efforts and rental assistance is needed. And then a series of other items, including housing, energy needs, the environmental focus, a whole series of things which are available if you want to take a look at the county board's budget guidance. So this is the time for you to ask questions, time for you to make a pitch if you have something that you think is important, or make a pitch about something you think we shouldn't be doing. That would be really helpful. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to you, Bryna, and take it from there.
Sure. While we're waiting for people to weigh in, and we want to get some background, and we want to understand the foundation of the outlook for the next year. So with that, I'm going to ask Richard if he could just enlighten us.
Okay. Thank you, Bryna. All right. I'm going to walk through a presentation that we gave to the county board in September and sort of level set our conversation here around what we're currently projecting in our forecast for FY 2023. And I'll highlight some of the pressures that Mark just mentioned on the expense side and similarly on the revenue side. So on a positive note, as we look forward and begin to prepare the 23 budget, the good news is that we are better off fiscally than we were at this time last year. Some revenues are starting to recover, and we could continue to see strength in the residential real estate market. Also, at this time last year, we didn't know the scale of the federal relief that we would be receiving, the ARPA funding available to Arlington, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. But the ARPA funding, along with other one-time funding sources, allowed us to balance the FY22 budget without taking significant cuts that would impact services. And ARPA allowed us to restore about $3.8 million of county services with one-time funding, and we utilized an additional $13 to $15 million in other one-time funding to balance this year's budget. So we'll likely need to continue to use one-time funding into 23 based on the revenue projections we're seeing right now. Our revenue is still recovering and to offset cost pressures that we also have, and I'll get to some of those pieces. But Mark mentioned compensation for our workforce. We also have the the ongoing pressures of metro schools, and now in the more recent environment, the inflationary factors affecting things like the contracts that the county has. So this next slide, I'll share a little more information on how our tax receipts are looking and what we anticipate for 23. So as I mentioned, fortunately, we're seeing continued recovery in a number of tax sources, and by FY 2023, we anticipate the return to normalcy for most of our revenue sources. On this slide on the left, there's some consumption taxes that we receive monthly, and they include sales, meals, car rental, and hotel taxes. And they've been impacted more than perhaps any other of our revenue sources. In our last, quote, normal year, which was 2019, a fiscal year before any COVID months, these taxes together made up over 10% of our general tax revenues. And in FY 2021, each of them was down significantly when compared to 2019. So, for example, car rental tax was down 46%, sales tax was down almost 12%, meals tax was down 33%, and hotel taxes were down over 75%, comparing those two FY 21 to 19 before COVID hit. In the recent months, we've seen some consistent recovery, specifically to these 4 tax sources. So, for example, in October, just 2 months ago, when looking at meals taxes, they were just 7% lower than the same month in the last fiscal year pre-COVID. And sales taxes almost recovery from a month-over-month sort of comparison. However, the hotel taxes in October, when you look back to pre-COVID levels, they're still down over 50% lower than we were, pre-COVID. But things are improving, like I said, and you can see the bar chart here on the left, how our forecast for these 4 particular taxes compared to the prior years. Also, didn't want to move so fast. On the other side, our residential real estate market continues to show strength. Although we won't know until later in the calendar year, in January, what this residential real estate growth will be. Preliminary information shows that we expect it to be positive. The graph here on the right shows the MLS numbers, the multiple listing service numbers for the number of home sales. And in recent months, you can see that the activity in the market has been greater than in 2020 and 2019. Similarly, home prices were increasing over prior years early this calendar year. And then back in June and July, there was some leveling off that we're returning back to more normal levels. But prices and sales seen this year will being stronger will impact the assessments of residential properties that we'll know just here in another month or two. So talking a little bit more about the pressures here, as I mentioned, given the market activity that we've seen, the residential market, we do anticipate that positive growth. In calendar year 2021, residential properties made up 53% of our real estate tax base, and real estate taxes as a portion of our overall tax revenue is 70% of total taxes. So it's really a revenue source and sector that underpins and supports our county operations. Potentially offsetting the anticipated growth on the residential assessments, we anticipate pressure still in the commercial sector. As we've mentioned in numerous previous budget conversations, there's a continued uncertainty in the office real estate market. And the chart on the right highlights the increase in vacancy rates in the county, which is one of the factors in this the assessed value of properties in this sector. There is continued uncertainty of the return to workplace and changes to how businesses are evaluating the need for physical office space. For hotel assessments, we continue to see the slow recovery, as I mentioned, in the tourism area, and we anticipate the impacts to expenses as a result of the inflation, as I mentioned, and potentially increasing interest rates. And for now, we continue to see the slow recovery in the transit ridership, which impacts a number of our transportation revenue sources. So as I talked about, we hope to see a continued recovery for all sectors of the commercial market, because Arlington's commercial commercial sector really are the key underpinning of the county's diversified financial tax base. So here on this slide, the graph shows a bridging from one point in time to the other, but we are in a better fiscal position and have a more solid outlook than we had at this time last year. But similar to last year, there are still a number of significant priorities and economic uncertainties to navigate as we develop the 23 budget, as Mark mentioned. These economic uncertainties will impact the tax base, but more importantly, they impact our community. We expect there will be some level of continued pandemic response in the next fiscal year to support both the health and welfare of our community, as there are going to be the continued lingering economic impacts on individuals and our business community. In order for us to maintain a delivery of high quality government service, we also face a real challenge in, as Mark mentioned earlier, employee recruitment and retention. And we will need to continue to carefully navigate the pressures on our revenue and expenditure needs to be responsive, but also fiscally responsible. Shoring up our budget, maybe in the interim here with appropriate levels of one-time funding until we see a more economic recovery in the out years. And that's what this graph is sort of representing with the bridge. So a number of things impacting the final budget the manager will bring before the board in the February timeframe. We've talked about real estate assessments are finalized in early January, and it's our largest revenue source. Additional, as we've moved through the fall here, from our initial forecast we gave to the board in September, we're getting additional data points on various taxes, specifically sales, meals, and the car rental, which I showed on a previous slide to help give us a better estimate for the 23 numbers. And right now we're getting department inputs of their base budgets, the impacts of they're seeing on by inflation, contractual cost increases, and getting input on the needs related to the economic and pandemic support. At this point, our assumptions for in the 23 budget for real estate, we are assuming a 1 to 2% growth. And in other taxes, comparing 23 to 22, we're seeing some stronger recovery there in those sources as sales and meals, as I talked about, are coming back in the 5 to 10% range. The manager's forecast that we're talking about includes compensation increases and assumes that non-personal expenses are increasing at CPI levels of anywhere in the 3 to 5%. We talk with departments and dig into all those contracts and how costs are changing as we build the proposed budget. And to close the gap, the manager and the board will have the typical levers for balancing that include utilizing one-time funds, as I mentioned, revenue changes potentially, or expenditure reductions or realignments. So a big portion of the budget and our community is schools and support to schools, and the revenue sharing agreement that we have as a starting point for building our budgets, both on the county and the school side, starts with the sharing of 47% of all of our local taxes to support schools as they're doing their budget development just as we are. And so based on our initial estimates for 23 and the ongoing revenue that I've talked about, schools would at this point anticipate a revenue transfer of 4 to 5% based on our tax revenue estimates. And as you can see at the bottom of the slide, there's lots of things that the county does on our side that help support the school and the school's activities. And then lastly, this graph shows the general timeline from September, when it's really the start of the budget process, though it's sort of all year. We're doing forecasts in the summer in preparation through the new fiscal year, which starts next summer next July 1st. So here in the November-December timeframe, we're getting a lot of important feedback, as Bryna mentioned in the beginning, from the community as the manager begins to develop the 23 proposed budget that will be released in February. And so with that, Bryna, I'll turn it back over to you to see what questions have come in or what other topics you want to have us highlight. You're muted.
Thanks, Richard. Really appreciate that presentation and some insights. Let's come back a little bit to some things that you commented on and just want to unpack it a little bit relative to, you mentioned ARPA funds and other federal dollars. And that was, the board, there was a presentation in September, but there's been some things that have happened since September. So can you lay out, how those funds have moved forward?
So a lot of things have happened since the forecast that we did in September. Also in September, the manager brought forward some guiding principle recommendations for the federal funding. And I keep saying ARPA, it's monies that Arlington received from the federal government for recovery funds. And Arlington will receive in two batches. We received 23 million already last May, and we'll receive another 23 million next May. But in determining what to do with those monies, the manager made recommendations in September around some guiding principles. And so came back to the board in October with recommendations around the use of some of those ARPA funds, and the board adopted sort of those guiding principles. Also in October, the manager presented the previous fiscal year's closeout recommendations, the closeout process for FY21 as we wrapped the books up, and there were monies, some discretionary monies available. And so as a part of that package, the manager was making recommendations to the board as it related to those funds. Also in October, the board adopted guidance, which Mark mentioned earlier, those guiding principles that will assist us in the development of the proposed budget. So that was through October. Then in November, we came back again, and the board adopted the closeout funding levels and adopted the allocation of ARPA funds. And so now we're in this process that I just talked about, with working internally with departments and then gaining that external feedback from the community.
Thank you. So with that, we do have some comments coming in. We also have a phone number for texting for those of you who are not directly logged into Facebook. If you're watching on our cable channel, at 571-348-3053. Again, call us at 571-348-3053. Text us, I should say. So we'll be happy to take your comments in that way as well as in Facebook chat. So with that, let's just get back right to some of the comments. And Mark, we've been spending a lot of time here in the county looking at racial equity and really, focused on how to apply the questions of who benefits, who's burdened, who's missing, how do we know, and then what do we do about it? And so just wondering if you can reflect how we might be thinking about applying an equity lens to this next budget. And that question comes from Abby Raphael. So thank you.
Right. So thanks for that question, Abby. Going through the preparation of the budget, in discussions with each of the departments and each of their proposals, and also exploring their base budget, we are asking those questions. I will tell you that in many cases, we do not have the data that we need in order to be able to answer those fully. But in lieu of that, those questions are really, at the end of the day, meant to elicit whether we have programs where the outcome will not be determined by where you live or what your race is. And so we do have, we're in the process of gathering a lot of data, but I'll give you an example. Our libraries programs, we just had a conversation about that. We do not gather any data that shows whether the color of the skin of the people who are borrowing books or making use of our services. So in lieu of that, we're using census data, census tract data, and overlaying it on our programs and what we do and what the impact is. So I think you'll be happy to see in the proposed budget a lot more information about tying where our program spending is and geographic and demographic information. But we are going through in each case and asking that question. And in many cases, our emphasis as a community for many years has been focusing on those people who have less means, and that does intersect with some of the equity questions. So, and I'll also tell you this, we've had long conversations with our colleagues across the country. This is still an evolving effort to try to come up with the best metrics possible. So we're spending a lot of time and energy on it, and stay tuned to see what comes out in February.
Super, thanks, Mark. I'm going to go, Gary is online, and he's with a group called Elders for Climate Action. And Gary's kind of interested in, one is how to engage with the county around climate change and climate issues, energy, and also, if there's any early insight about what we might be able to do around electrification or around energy and environmental planning.
Okay, so that is a big question, and the first thing I would do is I think that whatever focus you have on the environment, go back and look at 2019 to the community energy plan that was adopted by the county board. We're in the process of putting the finishing touches on our implementation plan for that. So everything that we do obviously has an impact on the environment. Let me start with some of the more basic things that we've done, which is increasing the percentage of our fleet that is electric vehicles, and also some very small things. For example, the board just passed last month direction to move away from gas-powered leaf blowers when we do our work out in our parks. But there's an enormous amount of information in the community energy plan. We've made a commitment about when to get to net zero and carbon neutrality over the coming years. We've made a big step on that already with a purchase power agreement we entered into about a year and a half ago that will allow us to buy credits towards that. There's a lot of things that are underway. One of the other questions I think I've seen about our electric infrastructure and charging stations. We are embarking on that, leaving aside the private sector where there is a lot of this is starting to spring up. Our fleet, we have sufficient stations for them to charge, and we're also going to be taking advantage of the large federal package, which the president just signed last month, that will bring a lot more infrastructure to us. So whether you're a senior, whatever your age is, and you want to get involved in climate action and environmental issues, there's already a huge amount of information on our website. Everything that we do, there's lots of room for improvement. The question is going to become, how much can we do and at what rate?
Thanks. That is so. I'm going to encourage Gary to reach out to us. We'd love to hook him into some of the other groups and make sure that he's on our list to get information about environmental updates. And so engage Arlington at arlingtonva.us. We'd love to have him share his email with us so we can loop him into updates as they happen. So thanks, Gary, for those good comments. And we're glad you're out there advocating. So we have some other Katie is on the line tonight with us, and she's kind of interested in class size and the budget. And Richard, you mentioned there's 47% of our funding goes to schools, and there might be an increase based on revenue. But can you talk a little bit, Mark? Katie, specifically interested in employee compensation. You mentioned employee compensation on the county side. And do you have any insights about how the school creates their budget and, what Katie might do to encourage work with her colleagues on the school board side?
So the schools is going through the similar process that the county is, and we talk to each other. I just talked to their CFO the other day, just sort of touching base on where she was curious where we were. So, giving her the next benchmarks of when we'll know certain information so they can develop their budget. They will see a revenue transfer increase based on the current principles of revenue sharing. And like I mentioned, we'll see positive revenue growth on our side. Both the county and the schools will have our own, in many respects, very similar cost pressures, compensation and contractual cost increases being similar to each other. The pressures there. The county has sort of other unique cost pressures like metro and some functions that we do that schools doesn't. But we're talking to them. I know that compensation is a very big cost driver for them, and I know similar to the county side that pay has been constrained on their side, and so there's a lot of pent up demand, and whether it's for employee compensation or just the services that the school kids and families need and expect, just as we have on our side for a variety of services. So I don't have details on where anything specific about their budget. Like I said, there's a lot of internal conversations that we're having with the manager and they're having with their superintendent. We don't have some of that information until January.
Great, thank you. So we encourage you to kind of follow the school budget process as well as our process. And again, as our cost sharing principles go with schools, we'll continue to follow those. So thank you, Katie, for those good questions. We've had some other insights. Today we were doing budget outreach at an apartment building in South Arlington, and I asked somebody, what's important to them, and somebody mentioned, they're concerned about pedestrian safety and transportation safety in general. And I'm just wondering if either of you might be able to talk a little bit about, what we might be doing either within the budget this year. Reflection there, I think this morning we're encouraging us to think about how we invest in pedestrian safety moving forward. And just wondering, what your thoughts are about how we are thinking about our infrastructure in that regard and education.
All right. So a couple of things about that, which is the county board signed on to the Vision Zero program, and I think this is close to a year and a half ago, and that the context of that program is to take a number of things that we've already been doing when it comes to pedestrian safety, which is the main thing, and then also bicycle safety and vehicle safety, and make sure that we are committed to what hopefully would be a world where there was no fatalities and serious injuries from interactions between cars and people and bikes and people. And we have been spending a lot of time putting together a Vision Zero plan. We've talked about that several times with the county board. At the end of the day, a lot of the things that we need to do fall into two categories. One is physical infrastructure, and we can talk a little separately about what our capital improvement plan process will be on that. And the other is on education, as you mentioned, getting people to think differently about their behavior. For example, I grew up, though some people claim I'm not fully grown yet, in a world where taking a right on red was really encouraged. That was the mantra to try to make sure that we were, saving energy. Now the paradigm has shifted, and this concept of taking right on red when you're at an intersection is really disfavored. And that educational switch by itself, in other words, do not automatically take that turn to do that, is a big lift for a lot of people. And that's just one example. And engineering the human brain as well as our physical infrastructure are the two main challenges we have. And so we're going to be heading into our CIP process again over the spring. And there's a big set of demands for neighborhoods improvements and street improvements and sidewalk improvements. We have a backlog of investments that we really need to focus on there.
Thanks, Mark. And, I think this is a good segue because we're talking about the operating budget, and we'll come back to that. But we also, you mentioned a CIP, capital improvement plan, and which is a whole different process. So, and we have Karen Talley with us. So I was wondering if we might ask Karen to talk a little bit about what is the differences in the operating budget and the capital improvement plan process, and when does that all take place, Karen?
Thank you, Bryna. So to put it simply, the main difference between the operating budget and the capital budget is that the operating budget shows expenditures for the current time frame, while the CIP plans for long-term investments. And in our case, it's over a 10-year period. And so the CIP, it's one of the most significant planning processes that we have in the county. The plan identifies capital needs of the community over a 10-year period, and it identifies immediate needs for maintenance of our major assets, but it also works to capture the longer-term capital needs as well. And so historically, our CIP has been a planning document that's been updated biennially every 2 years. But since the onset of COVID, the pandemic, our process has been a little different due to the uncertainty of the economic horizon. And so this year is really our first year getting back to the 10-year process since fiscal year 2021. And so, again, one of the main differences between the CIP and the operating budget is that the CIP process, it provides for advanced project identification, planning, and evaluation, while the operating budget focuses more on the day-to-day functions and programs for the county. The capital investments are paid from various sources, including local taxes, developer contributions, municipal bonds, fees, grants, as well as dedicated funding sources. And so our upcoming schedule, we're looking to propose our CIP in May of next year with adoption in July.
Super. Thank you for that background. And I think it's hard to differentiate because, they're so intertwined in our day-to-day lives. So really appreciate you kind of breaking it down for us. And, we have a great video that I'll ask some team members to put in the chat that really does break it down even in a more fun way with our county manager. So we'll put that in the Facebook chat, and we'll put that out for the community to learn more about. So with that, we have a couple other things that have come up in our journey over the last couple days in the community, Mark. And one is transit and fares for students, and also for people that are really struggling to put food on the table. And transportation is a big portion of somebody's day-to-day costs. So can you talk a little bit about anything we've been doing or thinking about in that regard? You're on mute.
We had a lot of conversation about this very subject in October and November when we were discussing with the board the disposition of the American Rescue Plan funds, the ARPA funds. Two proposals that we made that the board adopted. Number one was to allow Arlington Public School students on a going forward basis to travel on ART buses fare-free, a fareless initiative, and to see what kind of uptake there would be. It's a pilot. For the past, I'm going to say last 2 years, I think that it's been $1 a ride for students, to see how that's going to work. And in addition, we are now integrating into our benefit review when people come in to our Department of Human Services who might come in for assistance on various benefit programs, whether it's for food or other kinds of assistance, transit, and including as part of that package, providing them with some sort of fare card or other way so that they also, based on their income, can ride transit at a reduced cost or no cost. The challenge, another big challenge we face in transit has been the really plummeting ridership since the pandemic started. So we're actually investing a lot more money right now in our transit. And I think you'll see in the fiscal 23 budget, that's going to continue with this assistance for ridership. And you are right that for many people, it's a significant expense. And also for many people, the only way to get from one place to another. So it's really important that we have a strong transit system. And that's actually another place where we've been starting to make the move away from, we have our buses are powered by compressed natural gas, which 10 years ago was seen as at the cutting edge of environmental sensitivity. But now we're going to be making a pivot to electric buses once the technology is better proven. And we're in the process of just about to start building facilities that will be able to handle the electric infrastructure. So I went on longer than you wanted, but that's my story.
No, that's really great. I just want to, we have just a recommendation, and it's this is the opportunity for the community to kind of weigh in. So I wanted to just reflect that, there's a suggestion that we might consider including disaggregated data back to the equity issues and the using census tract data to understand kind of our overlay with services. But Abby Raphael also suggests that we try to include disaggregated data to help shed light on the disparities that exist. So I appreciate that comment, Abby, and so thank you. And thanks for all of your good work in the community as well. So we have another comment that just came in relative to mental health services. And I think you mentioned, Richard, or Mark, the guidance or the ARPA funds were to address some of the recommendations from the police practice group. And I know a big portion of that had to do with mental health services in the community, and especially emergency crisis mental health services. And so how does that play into either the use of ARPA funds or some other actions that we might be able to take?
All right, let me start off, and I think that when the county board adopted the fiscal 22 budget in April of this year, there was a significant investment made in moving towards a co-responder and a single responder model for mental health services. Our police are very well trained in trying to handle individuals with mental health issues, but the primary responders to mental health crises should be our mental health professionals. So we've invested in additional staff and equipment and vehicles for that response. And in the process of doing that, we're in the process of gearing up for the introduction of that into the community. One of the real challenges we found is that to hire the mental health professionals we need has been the primary challenge that we've faced. I made comments on this in September and October. We are in a very precarious position when it comes to have the mental health professionals that we need. This is just another example of why the board prioritized employee compensation first, to have the staff to go out and implement that first set of recommendations from the police practices group. And in addition, some actions that were taken by the state back in July, where they closed off admissions to use of any state mental health beds, has actually compounded what is a serious crisis in our community and other communities nearby, which is that people who are in extreme mental distress, rather than having a place to go to get care, right now are under temporary detention orders and are being handcuffed in many cases to gurneys in Virginia Hospital Center because there's no place for them to go. So one of the investments we made with the American Rescue Plan Fund money is to a bricks and mortar investment to immediately stand up a crisis intervention center that could provide some bed capacity and also additional staff. But I don't want people to misunderstand what's going on here. We have a serious crisis, and it's not just a matter of throwing money at the issue. It's a matter of finding people and also having a partnership with the state that will be effective. And the state has not stepped up and done what they need to do. But in the interim, we're stepping up and as the best we can, working with our partners nearby, trying to fill that bill. But it's not enough. We need to do more. And we're doing our best to follow through on those recommendations. And we're seriously committed to it. It's not a lack of money. It's not a lack of will on our part.
Thanks. I think a last comment in from Dave Cheek from Clarendon. Mark, this is a suggestion that, there are a lot of people in Arlington that have kids. Dave suggests that there's also residents that don't have kids, and to consider kind of, they don't benefit from all the money going to schools. So considerations for things Dave is suggesting, considerations for things like dog parks, protected bike lanes, and environmental initiatives that would benefit people with and without kids in the school system. So passing that along from Dave Cheeks.
Well, thanks, Dave, for that comment. Dave, I enjoyed seeing you over at the 100th anniversary celebration. I will say this, which is that about 20% of our families have school-age kids that use Arlington Public Schools. And I just wanted to say right now, having a fantastic school system benefits 100% of Arlington County residents. And having not only kids who are educated, but when it came time to convince Nestle or Amazon or any of our businesses to come to Arlington County, the first words out of my mouth were, what a fantastic school system we have. So that investment, which takes up more than the per person equation when you do it, is actually a great investment to do. So the other kinds of things that you mentioned, for example, dog parks and other kinds of assets that we have as a community are also incredibly important. We had a meeting, I know, Brian, you were there with me, and Richard was too, last week with some of the chairs of our advisory commissions. And I have to say that any proposal they came up with where they were making suggestions for the budget, I could not think of a suggestion they made that was a bad one. All programs that we really like and support. But the budget, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, you have to set priorities and make choices because we do not have an endless amount of money. So I appreciate hearing from Dave what your priorities are. So thanks.
Thank you, Mark. And to that point, I want Richard to just kind of share, kind of the scenario again, and then where we're at, so people can think about it. And then we're going to ask Jerry Solomon, our Director of Public Engagement, to share other ways people can weigh in on your 23 budget. So, Richard?
So when you said where we are in the process, or in terms of revenue expense sort of
revenue
forecast?
Expenses, I apologize. Thank you.
Yeah, so we still are projecting a gap between revenues and expenses. We are, based on the taxes that we're and other revenue that we're forecasting, we still have some challenges. We're still going to need to make some difficult decisions. But as I mentioned, we have some other levers this year that we didn't have in prior years, and that's some of the support that the federal monies have provided to us, and some monies that from last fiscal year that remain unallocated, one-time monies that we will try to responsibly use to support the budget, the operations of our budget in 23. So we're just in the middle of the process and going full bore through the proposal in February. And then once the manager proposes his budget, as you all know, the community again weighs in and the board makes changes. They may take some things out, they may add some new things. And so all the input that the community is providing for us now and down the road is very important to us in creating a funding plan that hopefully meets the needs for all in the community, with the understanding that there will be some trade-offs.
Excellent. So thanks, Richard. And with that, I want to we do have an engagement process. This is only a small portion of what we're doing on engagement tonight. And so I want to introduce everyone to Jerry Solomon, our Director of Public Engagement, to talk about how else people can contribute their thoughts and ideas for the 23 budget.
Hi, everyone. So our online engagement is underway, and we're hoping that you will contribute to that by sharing some insight on your priorities and basically how would you prioritize or even refocus spending among our various county services and programs. You can do so by going to engage.arlingtonva.us. And the engagement opportunities are available in English, Spanish, Amharic, Arabic, and Mongolian. So if you have neighbors, friends, family who haven't filled out the form yet, please do so today and through December 20th. We're looking forward to reading your feedback. Thanks,
Jerry. And we'd love to we have 230 1,000 plus residents, and as many people as we hear from, that helps the county manager. As he said, there's some real challenges in making some tough decisions. So Mark, I want to thank you and Richard and Jerry and Karen for joining us tonight, and turn it to you. It's been a pleasure being here with everyone tonight, and we'll give it back to you to send us off. Thanks.
Yeah, so thank you, Bryna. I've been in the county for a long time. I've worked with Richard and our great staff here, and we have great county staff. Every year when I make a proposal, and I've been county manager now for 6 years, I make a proposal about what's going to go in the budget. It is a statement driven by direction from the county board, and also an expression on the part of myself and our staff about what we think is important in the community and our values. Every year, we get to take a lot of time and focus on what the questions are and how we're going to go about allocating resources. And I do want to say, take a step back. We live in a great community. We do have problems that we need to face head on. We have a 10% poverty rate. We have a number of issues that have been baked into our system over the years about the way our zoning is used and the cost of housing. We have a lot of challenges, especially with the pandemic and making sure that everybody's getting the care that they need. The one thing that I would urge everybody is to continue to get involved, continue to express your views. It does matter. We do not have all the information we need in order to provide proposals to our board. And at the end of the day, our obligation of staff is to provide the most information, the most fulsome details, so our county board, based on staff input and especially input from the community, can make a great set of decisions and see what happens. So I just wanted to reemphasize what Jerry said about the opportunities to engage. They're incredibly important. We also, Richard and I and our budget staff and Karen, do get a lot of inquiries, and we will respond to you when you have questions directly. If you want to send us an email, do it, and we'll be happy to respond to you. So again, I'm just going to wrap it up, send it back to you, Bryna, and again, encourage people. You also might want to talk a little bit before we go out about some of the budget pop-ups we're going to have. That's another opportunity for people to make their feelings known. So thank you.
Thank you. And so online engagement and weigh in on the operating budget, as well as early insights into the 2022 capital plan, which Karen Talley shared with us. And we will be out and around the community. So look for us at Megamart, look for us at Glebe Market, look for us at the Roslyn Holiday Market. We will be around town, and we're just really grocery stores and all kinds of buildings in and out. So thank you. Have a great evening and a great December holiday season. Thanks, everyone. Good night.